Hello, everyone. I'm Harrison.
And I'm Rachel.
This week, we're talking about weeks 9 through 12 of pregnancy and how we told our family that we're having a baby. So stay tuned and join us on our journey to meet Baby H. We're going to start off this episode by going through some of the things that are happening with the baby as they're growing through weeks 9 and 12. So at the very beginning of all this, so week 9, they start about the size of an olive and they don't really weigh very much. And by the time we get to week 12, they'll be the size of a lime and weigh about half an ounce, which really is not that much, but they are getting so much larger.
They're really small, but they're doubling in size and plus more,
Yeah, almost every week they double in size, which is crazy. And so by the end of week 12, all of the essential organs are formed. Like they've at least started and all of the things are there. It's now just a matter of getting them to grow. You know, your baby is going to start growing a lot more after week 12 and they're developing a lot of strength, so that they can start opening and closing their hands and moving around a little bit. And they're just kind of practicing for their debut.
That first trimester is so incredible when you think about how everything that they need, every organ and body part is there. It's been developed. Obviously, they need a little bit more time to cook, but it's really cool how fast everything is going.
Yeah, and like in just 9 weeks to have all of those things started, it's just amazing that, there's so much more time for them to grow, but all of the stuff is there. And when you actually get to see them, they start to look more human, less like a tadpole.
Yeah. So most of my symptoms started around weeks 6 and 7, but by week 9, I was in the full swing of the first trimester and really feeling the worst parts of it. Like I mentioned before, I was having some nausea and vomiting, and I did get some medicine for that, which really just helped me survive and make it through every day.
Yeah, one of the big things that we realized real early on was that iron was a huge cause of Rachel's nausea. And as soon as we found out that she was pregnant, she started taking an iron supplement because we've always kind of thought that there's a possibility that Rachel's iron deficient. And iron is really important for a baby, especially early on, but it also really messes up your digestive system.
Yeah. But I did notice around week 10, a lot of my symptoms became more manageable. My nausea, I think I stopped puking every day around that point, and it more was just feeling sick throughout the day. But I did have like constipation and breast tenderness. My legs would get tingly, some of those really common things. It's kind of incredible that you can read on the pregnancy app, like you may be experiencing this or this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm experiencing every single one of those. And that's exactly how I feel right now. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah, the biggest symptom that was really kind of crazy, other than the nausea, was how tired you were all the time. Like every single day, it seemed like you would want to take a nap all the time.
And I'm a very sleepy person to begin with. I really enjoy naps and I go to bed early. But yeah, this was just next level exhaustion. I needed to get 12 hours of sleep a night to be able to stay awake through the day.
Yeah, I mean, your body's doing so much more like to help, this other thing grow. Your body's got to be doing a lot. So some of the things that Rachel was craving, we already talked about mac and cheese, but there also was this sudden turn towards salads.
Yeah, and I think some people say that your body like craves what you need. And that's kind of interesting because there was a point in time where I was really craving eggs, and eggs have a lot of iron in them. So I think there is some truth to that of like your body is going to want the things that it needs. And maybe I just really needed some veggies.
Yeah, and it's really crazy that your body can do a lot of those things, that the vitamins you're short on and things that you really need more of, that you suddenly start needing, wanting those foods more often. And even if you didn't know like that there's iron in eggs, you still are going to be sitting there going, I really want eggs, or that sounds really good. And you have no clue why, but it's really kind of crazy that, people are able to do that.
Yeah. And I really depended on my diet to get those essential vitamins because my prenatal vitamin was just sickening to me. Like I just could not get it down. There were times where I would start, chewing the gummies and spit them out because it just made me feel like I was going to throw up, or couldn't get a pill down because I couldn't eat food to take it, So they were just,
Well, and it's a big problem that you could take the prenatal and then like within an hour, if you threw up, did you really get anything from the prenatal?
right. And I think doctors do encourage you to try to get your nutrients from food first, because that's the best way you can get it. And then the vitamin is like an extra, but you still feel really bad. Like, I still have guilt when I don't take it because you know that the baby needs it.
Now, you found best luck when taking the prenatal that if you took it at night, like right before you went to bed, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things, but you definitely turned a lot towards salad and ramen noodles, which is really weird, but maybe you needed more salt. Yeah, that's definitely not the case.
But around week 8, we told our parents. So our first ultrasound was 8 weeks and 3 days. And that's when we saw the heartbeat. And we decided pretty much immediately that we were going to tell our parents. Of course, they were super excited. So that made us more excited. But we decided to wait and tell our siblings for a little bit longer, just because you're still in the first trimester. And every week is a huge milestone at that point.
Yeah, and we really felt that if a miscarriage did happen, that, not anything against our siblings, but we really just didn't feel like we wanted to have that conversation with all of our siblings.
Yeah, and I think you almost feel responsible for their emotions too. Like, you don't want to upset your friends and family because they're going to be excited for you. So even though that's not something that we should think about, we do.
Yeah, it's not something you have control over, but you don't want to get someone's hopes so high just to bring them right back down. Even if it didn't work out that one time, it probably would eventually, but sometimes those things take time, and we just felt that if we were in that scenario, the best support group for us would have been our parents, and not needing to have that conversation with a ton of other people.
Yeah. So on my side of the family, this will be my parents' third grandchild, and this will be Harrison's parents' first grandchild. So it's been kind of interesting. My mom is super excited and has jumped right in with the planning and sending me registry items and all the things. And I think Harrison's parents are really cute because they're kind of taking their time digesting it.
Yeah, I think that even though Rachel and I had talked a lot about when we want kids and the timeline for that, we didn't really have that conversation with my parents. So it probably came to them as a pretty big shock that we were going to have a kid so soon, because it is the very first one for them. But for Rachel's parents, they already had 2 grandchildren and probably thought that time was coming a little bit closer.
But all the grandparents are very excited.
Yeah, it's been really fun to see how other people react.
So around 10 weeks, we went and got an elective ultrasound, which is an outside business. They're not associated with our doctor at all. They aren't doctors themselves, but they are experienced in ultrasounds, and they kind of just do the basics. You can check in, see the baby, hear their heartbeat, get a couple pictures, and that's really it. And that's all that we needed because we just wanted some reassurance. I think the appointment was even called a reassurance scan.
That one was called a reassurance scan, and it really is just ultrasound techs that have stopped working at a hospital or a clinic for a wide variety of reasons, but that ultrasound tech is just kind of there to provide a little extra reassurance if you can. And that's really what we wanted, because the timeline as far as when we were seeing people and when we thought it would be best to tell everyone, it was going to be before we had the opportunity to reach 12 weeks. So we decided to go ahead and get this reassurance scan done just so that we could have seen our baby twice before we started telling people outside of our parents.
And this was the first time we saw them move. So that was really cool. They were being very active and kind of squirming around. And that was definitely my favorite part. But they did tell us that the heartbeat was 179, which is very high. I think the normal range stops around 170, but that early on, it's so variable that you just don't know. It could be concerning. It could be nothing.
Yeah, and a big thing, though, is That reassurance scan we did at 10 weeks. And for most pregnancies, you don't get an ultrasound done at 10 weeks. You either get an ultrasound done at 8 weeks or 12 weeks. There's not actually a whole lot of data that you can find about what is normal for a baby's heart rate at 10 weeks because people just don't check in around then. So, we were a little concerned that it was high. And basically, babies' heart rates, I mean, they're high compared to an adult, or at a child, even. They're just high. And that's okay. But we kind of came to the conclusion that the higher heart rate was because the baby was moving around a lot.
Yeah. And we did spend some time reading about it, of course, because it was concerning. So we wanted to know a little bit more about it. But all we could really do at the end of the day was just wait for that next appointment. Their heart rate kind of rises at the beginning, and then it should around 10 to 12 weeks kind of peak and start going back down to whenever it gets to their birth heart rate.
Yeah, and one of the things about a reassurance scan is because it's not a medical association, it is a third party that just happens to have an ultrasound machine, and they cannot give you any updates medically. They really can just say, like, oh, well, there it is. You can see it moving. And so, even if your baby had an extremely high or low heart rate, they're probably not able to tell you a whole lot about that because of, the liability issues. And so, really, you can't do anything other than just wait for your next appointment. So, we waited for the next appointment, which was at 12 weeks, and we're just hoping that at that point the heart rate went down.
Yeah. But before then, we decided to tell our siblings and our grandparents that we were pregnant. So that Saturday ended up being my brother's birthday party. And my mom had this idea to have his birthday cake kind of say baby H coming fall of 2022. And when we sang happy birthday to him, we were going to bring that cake out and kind of surprise everyone else that was there.
Yeah, we kind of hijacked his birthday party, but I think that he thought it was pretty okay.
We did tell him before, so he was happy that he got to know before the rest of my siblings, but it was really cute when we all started singing happy birthday, and my other brother, the one that it wasn't his birthday, was like, what? He could not believe it.
Well, people were just slowly reading the cake and realizing what was going on. So it was really fun just to see everyone's reaction and just to see them all be excited.
Yeah.
So for my family, we didn't have an opportunity to see them very close to that time frame. So we wanted to make sure that my family knew around the same time that Rachel's family. And we also kind of knew that once you start telling all these people, it's just going to spread like wildfire. So we decided to go ahead and call all of my siblings. So we called them each individually, and my brother is in high school and is still living at home with my parents. So when we told my parents, he was actually there. So he just kind of happened to get the information early, and that was okay. But my two sisters, we went ahead and called them, and it was really cool because my oldest sister is a photographer, and she actually was able to take some photos for us so that we could post a couple pictures for my extended family.
Yeah. And that was a lot of fun too. But I think everyone was super excited and also shocked and didn't really know what to do. A little backstory, we had told all of our family when we got married that we were going to wait 5 years before we started trying to have kids because we were just adamant that we wanted to be out of debt and that we wanted to have a house.
Yeah, and we are big time planners. We love to plan everything. So I'm sure they all were convinced that they know that everybody says after they get married, like, oh, it'll at least be 5 years. And most people don't stick to it. But I think that in all of our family's mind, they thought for sure we would stick to it.
Yeah. So everyone was a little surprised by that. And I think it was a good surprise.
Yeah. And sometimes you say those plans and you really think that that's what's going to be best for you. But as time goes on, it just isn't. We thought it was a big deal that our kid have cousins that are close to them in age. And really, there wasn't any reason for us to keep waiting.
And I'm just a big believer of things will happen when they're supposed to happen. And now was when it was supposed to happen, I guess.
Yeah. So after that, after all of our family knew, we didn't really try and hide it from anybody at that point. We didn't make a big Facebook post or post it on Instagram. We just kind of let it spread as it spreads. And it didn't take very long for everybody to find out. It's really cool just to see all these people being excited for us. And we're really excited that one day they'll get to meet our kid.
Yeah. So our next appointment was at 12 weeks. And this appointment was not an ultrasound, but they did listen to the baby's heartbeat with a Doppler. And it took a while for them to find where that little baby was.
Yeah, and I don't really know how the Dopplers work, but for the when they do an ultrasound and they have you listen to the heartbeat, they actually are able to find it because they put a little spot on the screen where they measure how the heart is moving, because you actually can see it moving at that time. I don't really know how the Doppler works, but they kind of had to feel around for a little while before they were able to get it to show up.
Yeah, and the baby was very low, which they start out really low and then they kind of get higher as you go along. But the heart rate had gone back down to around 160, so we were feeling good about that.
Yeah, and one of the things that was kind of interesting about the Doppler that I didn't really think about is the technician actually had a little bit of a hard time separating it so that you couldn't hear Rachel's heartbeat, but you only could hear the baby's. And I think actually the first time we could hear it, it was kind of a mixture of both. And you kind of had to listen really, really hard to see which beats were the baby's and which ones were Rachel's. And Rachel even asked, she's like, well, how do you know which one's the baby's? And the tech was just like, it's the one that's really, really fast. Because if your heartbeat was that fast, you would be dead.
Yeah, all three of us had a good laugh right there. But and then the rest of the appointment was just asking questions, checking in. We had plans to take our first longer drive of this pregnancy. So I asked the doctor what I should be looking out for, things that we should do when you're going to be in a car for 6.5 hours.
Yeah, and the biggest thing that they said was just make sure you get out of the car and move. You know, one of the symptoms Rachel mentioned earlier was that her legs were falling asleep a lot more often. And basically, it's because when you're growing a baby, the priority for blood flow is not your legs and your arms. So your extremities kind of don't get as much blood as they usually do because all that blood is going to the baby. So they kind of just said every couple of hours or so, make sure you get up and move around.
Yeah. And I was glad that we got to see our doctor before we went on that trip, just as a little check-in, make sure everything is okay. And we felt good about going away for a little bit.
Yeah, and if your symptoms are really not like that extreme, or like you don't have a lot of nausea, it's really not hard to forget that you're expecting a kid.
Yeah, I think we both had moments of like, oh, I forgot that I can't do that because I'm pregnant. Or like,
yeah, I mean, there's just like little things. Like, it's not something that you think about all the time. And, 12 weeks may sound like it's a really long time, but it's not really that long.
There's moments that feel long.
Yeah. Imagine when you're puking everything out, it feels like you've been doing this forever. And I don't feel like those first 12 weeks took that long, but I don't have to deal with all the physical changes.
But right now, especially around 10 weeks when my symptoms kind of started to go away, I was feeling a little bit more like myself, and it was just really easy to kind of forget. I still fit in my clothes. I still felt as active as I was,
Yeah, and say the first trimester probably wasn't the best for you because of all the nausea, and that was really just a big thing. But other than that, I don't really think that it was that bad.
No, it could have been way worse, but I really don't like puking.
That first trimester can be pretty brutal, and we're happy to be on the other side of it.
Next time, we are going to talk about the non-invasive prenatal test, or NIPT, and whether we decided to do it or not.
There are a lot of pros and cons and costs to consider, so I hope you'll tune in. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.